second study session to order. Please join us with the pledge. In the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There's the mic. That's quick. Thank you and welcome. It's always nice on our study sessions to have the opportunity to recognize special guests, special students usually. Dr. Ritter?
Yes, tonight we have a couple celebrations that we would like to make, and then Dr. Ritter has one as well, if I may remind him, on the Hall of Fame. But anyway, at this time, I can't get my screen up. Dr. Harrell, you take it from here. Whoever is first.
Good evening, Mr. President and members of the board. It is a very exciting time, an opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of our students and of our teachers. And this evening we have two young ladies that we're going to celebrate, both of them from Glendale High School. So I'm going to be turning this over to Dr. Pierce here real quick, give him the opportunity to introduce these fine young ladies. But the first is going to be Alicia Pry. And Alicia was awarded first place in fashion construction at the Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America National Star Event in 2012. We're also going to be recognized Mrs. Kana Lance. And Ms. Lance is a Bezos Scholar Program winner who was able to attend the Aspen Ideas Festival in Aspen, Colorado over this last summer. And so to tell you a little bit more about those individuals and those opportunities, I'm turning this over to Dr. Pierce. Dr. Pierce?
Thank you, Dr. Harrell. Members of the board and Dr. Ritter, it's my pleasure as principal of Glendale High School to recognize these two outstanding young ladies. First, Alicia Pry, national champion in FCCLA, first in the United States in her category. Pretty outstanding and awesome. She's here tonight with her parents, Bernadette and Mark, and Jenny Chamberlain and Kendall Bachman. Jenny and Kendall are teachers, and Jenny has worked with Alicia nonstop and done a great job, and we're very proud of all of them. And this really has been a family-school combined effort, so we're very proud of that also. So without further ado, Alicia, will you come up and tell about your project?
also a satin weave, so it is very soft to the touch. This quality would be important during the graduation ceremony, as there would be a lot of standing and other opportunities for wrinkling. As you examine my project, you may have noticed some construction skills that I've used. First of all, in the side and center back seams of the skirt, I used French seams, as you can see here. I used this so the texture of the serging wouldn't show through the delicate fabric. This also eliminated the possibility of fraying. I have added darts in the bodice here and here to give it more form and shape. To prevent fraying at the shoulder and side seams of the bodice, I've serged seam allowances separately. To give the armhole support and a nice finished look, I used armhole facing, as you can see here, that I made using fabric. For added ease and give in this area, I clipped and trimmed the seam allowances. Once the bodice was completed and the waistband was added, I attached the skirt and closed it up using hand stitching along the entire length of the waistband. This, of course, is only visible from the inside, giving it a nice finished look from the outside. In completing my dress, I used a roll hem at the bottom of the sleeves and at the bottom of the skirt. This gave it a wavy finish and a nice draping effect. Some concerns I had when going into my project were both the napped and slippery fabric and also the hemming on the curves. When working with the napped fabric, I had to make sure all the pattern pieces were laid out the same way to avoid any color variation in my dress. Keeping your stitches and hem straight could be a challenge when working with the slippery fabric. Going slower in my execution and staying cautious helped me avoid any of these issues. Because of the full skirt and sleeves, there were many long continuous curves that I needed to be aware of. To avoid uneven hems in these areas, I used a rolled hem. In addition, I designed the jewelry you see here to complement the dress with the similar shapes and colors and had a local artist make it for me. My goal going into this project was to make a one-of-a-kind dress for my high school graduation. To make it different from everyone else's, I added extra details that weren't originally in the pattern. This included the sleeves, the French seams, the roll hems, and the hand stitching. To finish my dress, I worked on it from December 19, 2011 until January 30th, 2012 at my school and home. I was able to complete this dress using the skills I have learned from my different sewing classes, the pattern's instructions, and my mother. Thank you again for your time and attention.
Does anyone on the board have any questions for Alicia?
Where are you in school?
What size is it?
Yeah, can I get your address for prom? And I got 2 daughters that need dresses bad.
Yeah, customer.
Where are you going to school now?
MSU.
Awesome.
And majoring in.
I'm majoring in graphic design and fashion design.
Great.
This helps explain my wife's behavior in a sewing room. So I was always trying to figure out what's going on in there. So it kind of helps. But anyway, I want to congratulate you. It's fantastic what you've done. This is all on your own. So way to go, and I wish you well in your future. Wish you well. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Our second student this evening is current Glendale senior Kana Lance. Kana is here with her mother and her mother, Shelly, and GHS teacher Justine Lines. Get those confused. Kana and Justine went to the Bezos Foundation Academy this summer and had an incredible leadership experience and opportunity. And she's going to come and share with you some of the things that she learned and is bringing back to us here in Springfield as part of that program.
Hello, my name is Kana Lance, and I'm a senior at Glendale High School. Last summer, I was selected as one of 12 students from the country to be a Bezos Scholar. My educator scholar, Justine Lines, was my team partner. The Bezos Scholars Program starts with an all-expense-paid trip to attend the Aspen Ideas Festival in Colorado, where I attended 6 days of seminars, tutorials, lectures, and debates about big ideas. I shared scholars-only discussions with some of the most provocative thinkers, writers, artists, entrepreneurs, and change makers from around the world, including New York Times writer David Brooks, CNN news correspondents, humanitarian Lauren Bush, and Admiral Mike Mullen. I also attended leadership workshops. The next step in the Bezos Scholars Program is to create my own local project. The title of my project is LEAF, which stands for Leaders in Environmental Action for the Future. LEAF's mission is to teach leadership skills and educate students on environmental issues to be future leaders in their communities. This year's LEAFs, a group of 20 Glendale students, will participate in year-long training and community service so that by the end of the school year they can create their own community projects focused on local and global environmental concerns. LEAF is also planning an Earth Day festival to reach out to the Springfield community. Our hope is that LEAF will be adopted by other Springfield high schools in the future so that more high school students and community members will be inspired to become leaders of change. Thank you.
Very impressive.
Are there any questions?
For Kane?
I have one, if I may. David Brooks.
Yes.
What's he like? I'm curious.
He is so inspiring because I was kind of nervous. He was one of the first notables that we met with, and I figured out that he was just a normal guy, and he took us through his process of working really hard to achieve his goals and following his passion of writing to become the high-level, New York Times writer that he is today. He was awesome.
I think this is the third year in a row that Springfield Public Schools has been represented, and you said there were 12?
Yes, 12 from the United States and 5 from
entire
Africa.
United States.
Yes.
Thank you so much for representing us and representing us well.
Thank you.
Same to Alicia.
Now, Kana had a chance to go to Africa with us, and she appropriately turned it down to me. Good choice. Thank you very much.
Where are the students from in Africa?
They are from all around Africa. They all attend the African Leadership Academy in Johannesburg. They were from Kenya, South Africa. My roommate actually was from Ethiopia. That was really cool. And Mauritius it's a small island nation off the coast of Africa.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And your
Thank
team.
you.
We have one more special recognition tonight. Just announced this week is the 2012 class on the Springfield Public Schools Hall of Fame. Pretty impressive group. Charles Armstrong, a Kickapoo High School graduate from '75, has worked with NASA for 30 plus years, been involved in the Space Shuttle program, the International Space Station, multiple other programs, and was a rocket guy from way back when, and even in high school apparently. Impressive. Betty Cole Dukert, who was a Central grad in 1945, her major claim to fame is her 41 years as executive producer of NBC's Meet the Press show. And one of the first women in that field, started off as a secretary or administrative assistant and worked her way right up. And she's also been a trustee of Drury, so she's got lots of ties back here. And then posthumously honoring Dr. Stuart Fulbright, Lincoln High School, class of '37. He just passed away this past January at age 92. Was a Tuskegee Airman during World War II. Went on to become the first dean of North Carolina Central University's School of Business. And he was able to go to Washington when the Tuskegee Airmen got the Presidential Gold Medal in 2007. His son will be here, and he has lots of friends who are still in the community and who'll be here with him. So this is Thursday, October 18th at the White River Room over by Bass Pro at 11:30. Lisa Langley is happy to sell you tickets anytime you'd like to buy them. And also thanks to 417 as our lead sponsor and the Foundation for Public Schools, and we have quite a few other sponsors who will be recognized that afternoon. Ought to be a really great event. And once again, 3 just outstanding people who we can be proud of as graduates from Springfield. And I believe that's all the special recognitions we have. And students, feel free to go do homework. Let's move on to strategic discussion. I think Mr. Manis has some updates for us on the strategic plan.
Thank you. Dr. Prater. Just very briefly, an update on next steps for the strategic planning process based on some board feedback we received. I think you're going to have an opportunity to spend some time looking at the detail of the goals, indicators, and measures. In addition to that, we'll spend some time looking at the breakdown of all the various stakeholder input material we have, including frequent voters, parents, teachers, students, postgraduates. Some very good detail on that I think you'll find informative. So that will be an opportunity for the board to weigh in. Currently what we're doing with the cabinet is working on looking at each measure, and I've received some additional feedback from cabinet this week on potential additions and potential subtractions on measures. And a couple of big items obviously we're waiting on is the long-range facilities plan, which we'll hear a little more about tonight in terms of the direction we're going with. Some research I think will be essential for the board. And then I think on October 18th at the board retreat, also Dr. Ritter has carved out some time for you to take a look at shaping the strategic focus that you requested to do. So what my plan is to provide you with those materials in the next 2 weeks so you'll have a little more background, and then that way you can direct us a little bit on the strategic focus of the district. And then hopefully in the coming months we can wrap up any additional input we may need. And I think the main goal is for the remainder of the year to make sure that that information is provided at the site level so they'll have an understanding as well. We did take the initial strategic plan model as a prototype and send it out to stakeholders for feedback. We feel like we've got the basics of what we need. So it will be nice to have that final piece with the board's strategic vision in place. So be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to it. We have some public speakers this evening. Let me remind the speakers that if you submitted requests to speak, you'll be welcome to speak and limited to 5 minutes for each speaker. Mrs. Luton times it very accurately. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members in an open meeting by name. If you have concerns about individuals, these can be addressed to the appropriate administrative supervisors either in the school or in the district office. Our first speaker is Vicki Kepling. Thank you.
Hello. I'm a little nervous. I just found out this morning about, and thank you for letting me speak, sorry. I'm Vicki Kepling, and I just found out this morning about the plan to possibly create a second center for preschoolers with disabilities in our community. And I'm here tonight to express disapproval for how we are separating our students. Just last year, Springfield schools pulled the majority of preschoolers with disabilities away from their neighborhood schools, away from older siblings and neighbor kid or friends, to separate them and educate them in a center-based school. Only children with disabilities were removed, not the other Title I preschool students. That is segregation. Not to mention the fact that the center you chose to put them in was across the street from a bar and within legal requirements from a convicted sexual offender. Now we are hearing that one center is not enough, that we now need 2 centers to accommodate our students. There's even talk of building a new separate facility for them, and you want our tax dollars to do it. Whether that be state, federal, or local tax dollars, it doesn't matter. It's wrong. It's our money, and I, for one, do not want to put more money into segregating our students. I wish this district would spend time and energy trying to keep our children together. Title I Wonder Years preschoolers have classrooms in regular schools. It is not fair to pull only the preschoolers with disabilities out from the regular schools while maintaining space for the Wonder Years programs. It's just not fair. According to DESI, the lease on the proposed property has not been approved as yet. I hope that the public school system will stop this action and try to spend money to create community and inclusion of our students with special needs. Once our children have been separated, it is very difficult to mainstream them back into regular settings. Separation is not good. Please stop sending us back in time. Parents and families fought hard to get our children included in regular schools, and now we seem to be going backwards, and I hope you'll stop. And I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sophia Yasin.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sophia Yasin. I'm concerned about the plan for the special education children, the preschoolers. I'm worried about what the influx will do later when they reach elementary age. And since we're already segregating them to a special building, how is that going to work when they get older and these end up as high schoolers and it continues on? So I believe that inclusion is the best way for not only the special ed kids, but the mainstream children as well, because eventually we're going to have to deal with all this influx of children in the real society. And that's about all I have to say.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And our final speaker is Dania Bush.
Hi, how is everybody?
Good.
I'm Dana Bush with the Missouri Autism Report, and I'm here because a lot of the families asked me to come. They were not able to be here, and they wanted a representative that could just let you know that they are concerned about what's going to happen to the children. Now, if I understand correctly, we're looking at right now preschool age children. Is that correct? The 3 to 5 age. And I realize there's not a neurotypical age group probably that mirrors that, but there is some concern that these kids not get so segregated, or that the older ages especially don't get so segregated that they don't get to be with their peers. This is a real concern in some of our other school districts. Parents are just really having a hard time with that, and so they are very concerned that these children not get segregated away from their typical peers, because those are their role models. That's how they learn to interact. And it's good for the other children. At our school, where my children go, a few years ago we had a young lady with Down syndrome, and she was nominated our homecoming queen. And that is a school where every child has the opportunity to learn. They believe every child can learn, and every child should have the same opportunity. And we'd like to see that happen across the board, not just with our kids with autism, but it's important for our peers, our classmates. Everyone learns to how to interact, because right now we have 1 in every 72 children are being diagnosed with autism, and this is a huge number. If there were that many being kidnapped out of our school, we'd have a national alert going on. We're at epidemic proportions, and that's why you're seeing numbers go up of these disability numbers. So we would just encourage you to work closely with DESE, listen to the parents, and maybe really consider their concerns about having their children included with the other children and not separating them so that they're the kids in the disability class, but that they are included as much as possible. The law does say in the least restrictive environment, and we'd like to see that adhered to as closely as possible. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. We'll move on to information items, and our first is the new internal audit charter, and I'll let Mr. Lee introduce that, since he's been intimately involved.
Thank you. Just backing up a little bit before I jump right into the item at hand. As you know, when the board made the decision that we wanted an internal auditor, which is long before we had the audit from the state, that was a decision that this board wanted to have. I think one of the things that in the discussion that we heard in the process of hiring the auditor was not just hire a good auditor, which we got. We got a great auditor, internal auditor in Wayland. He's going to be tremendous. But I think we wanted to add some structure and some direction from that with respect to the board and the administration. And I think with that backdrop, it was important for Mr. Mueller to put and the board to have a good sense of where do we want to head, what do we want to accomplish, and what are some of the priorities for the internal auditor, so that it's not, as Mr. Renner's favor, a bunch of random arrows going on, but there's something strategic about it, and we really got some direction. So with that, in front of you is the internal audit charter. In other words, basically setting and establishing some guidelines, direction, and support for the internal audit function, which I think is really important, so everybody's kind of on the same page. Him, administration, board, community is all pretty much on the same page with respect to the expectations. And I'm not going to go through all this whole thing. You all had a chance to read it, but I think there are a couple things that I think are really important. As we talk about the mission, I really think that one of the things I was happy to see was we're talking about adding value and improving the district's operations. I think that's the ultimate role of the internal audit function. We talked about that not being a policeman, so to speak. Certainly they got to be making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do, but the perception is not a policeman. The perception is we're here to become more efficient, effective and efficient district, and there's just tremendous value that can be added by having that internal audit function there. We talked about the independence a lot, that this position needs to be totally independent with respect to where they how they function with respect to the board and also to administration. And under the authority, I'm going to suggest a change in the charter, and that is, it says all employees are requested to assist the internal auditor. I'm going to propose that we change that to expected. All employees are expected to assist the internal auditor. I don't know, I think that adds more definitive direction. The other thing I think is really important with respect to this is the continuing education, that we maintain a high level of education for that position, and that there are continuing ed requirements to be at that position, and I think that's really important. We keep raising the bar for that. And really, I think the effort has to get back to risk-based methodology is the term that's in here, but I think it's really important that we focus on where we get the biggest bang for our bucks and we get the biggest return on investment, rather than literally chasing pennies with dollars. That happens sometimes. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot. I'm not going to go through all the audit scope. You may have some questions about that Dr. Ritter, myself, or Mr. Mueller could answer. But hopefully it's broad enough that I know some of the questions that Mr. Hosmer brought up with respect to how can they help us evaluate programs, look at cost-benefit analysis on efforts that we're doing, which I think is very, very important, rather than just making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed based on accounting principles, that there's truly some cost-benefit and the expertise is there to do that. So I think it's a good charter. I think it's really important that we move forward and establish some structure to give to that position on a continual basis. And
Mr. Mueller, you're back there somewhere.
he's hiding.
Oh, yeah, there he is. Pop up here, and so if we have any questions for you or for Mr. Lee, we can address them. Any question? Ms. Twitty?
Not so much for Mr. Mueller, but just so that within the district, Dr. Ritter, how is this position being explained? I know we've had one before, but it's been a long period of time. what the expectations are, and now that we're changing requested to require, how are we communicating this role and really what a good thing it is?
We basically have introduced Mr. Miller already to our leadership as far as site leadership and other leadership. That was, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
And everybody's looking forward to the work. And so it's, I think the only real excitement at the sites right now, if I call it excitement, is is basically all the attention that they need to pay that they weren't before as far as following that dollar. And so I think that's probably the thing. Now, Waylon hasn't been there yet. I think they're anticipating his arrival. But either way, he's been introduced. Expectations, the bar is pretty high. I also feel Mr. Chodas, along with his team, has introduced a lot of benchmarks that are already in place or they are putting in place, and then that's where he's going to be checking on that. And so I really think it's not so much he's serving as a watchdog. The understanding is that he's going to add as far as ideas to be able, what I would call for an efficient, effective approach. So we've introduced him to a lot of all the directors as far as division, department, as well as principals. So, but it's going to on-go. I'm waiting for the charter.
A couple of questions. The charter that we've got in front of us, is that something that you're comfortable with, that you've gone through and feel is appropriate for your purposes?
Yes, definitely. I drafted this charter, and I based it on...
He came to me and asked me.
And I based it on guidelines from the Institute of Internal Auditors, which provide the standards that the internal auditing profession follows. So, yes, I am very comfortable with this.
And then the other question I have goes back to what Jerry was talking about, and we've talked about this on the board a number of occasions, and that is, having somebody kind of giving the board a bit of an objective analysis of where we're spending money and whether, and opinions on whether or not there are ways to spend that money differently. Not that we're necessarily spending the money, inappropriately, but that there's more bang for your buck over here. Is there something in this charter that allows that? Are you going to be required? Are you going to wait for the board to say we want you to look at these particular things, or are you going to come to the board and say I've got 4 or 5 things I want to look at this year, and here's what they are? How does that work?
Overall, that concept is addressed in the mission statement of the Internal Audit Charter, just in a broad sense, where it addresses that my position is designed to add value and improve the district's operations. But in terms of specific projects, that's actually the next information item. But yes, I would be bringing audits to be added to a work plan to the board, and the board would be providing me feedback. The board would provide ideas for audits as well. So it would be an ongoing communication is the idea here.
The thing that he's also going to be doing is becoming a quality examiner so he understands our system. And I think that's going to support as much as anything. So that's part of our discussion as well, so to respond to that.
Question?
Yes.
So he will not be a member of cabinet, right? Is that correct? So he's independent of cabinet and cabinet discussions, okay. And then I noticed in your last paragraph on audit planning, you do mention a schedule that will be developed. So do you see the schedule looking something like you will have time set aside that you'll be visiting the buildings? And then in addition to that, audit projects that may be suggested by the board or suggested by the cabinet, or how do you foresee that?
Yes, in terms of audit planning, the next information item is the annual audit work plan. And that's how the overall annual schedule, if you will, is developed and approved by the board. But there's definitely going to be a lot of visits to schools. It really depends on the specific audit that I'm working on. Some of it will all take place here at the district office, but a lot of it will take place on site at the schools.
I just make one comment about that, because I think that's really an important point, that the audit function is not this black box that stuff is shoved in and then something comes out the end. I really think it's important for the auditor to be visible to the sites, to the leadership teams, as a resource to help get things done and be more effective and efficient. So I encourage, we've talked about that, and encourage them to get, schedule time, be out there, not necessarily from an audit standpoint, just understanding this, how we operate and how our systems work.
And I think your audit scope, but your bullet points there really lay out some of the issues that we've addressed here tonight. I think you hit the right things. You highlighted the right things. While you're there, let's talk about the internal auditor work plan. And then both of these items, with that one-word revision, I think that you heard suggested, will come to us for a vote on the October 16th meeting.
Yeah. Go ahead. The second information item here is the fiscal year 2013 internal audit work plan. And this is a prioritized, risk-based plan. And by its nature, it's a plan, which means it can change based on different priorities coming to my attention. But once this plan is approved, this is the priority that I plan to follow unless something changes, which at that point, that would get approved by the board as well. I have developed 3 priorities. The first one is really a large one that will take quite a bit of time, but this is following up on the state audit findings. I won't be reperforming that audit by any means, but what I will be doing is looking at the district's response, the changes that have been implemented as a result of that audit, to see if those have been effective, if they're being complied with. That's the nature of that first audit. The second one is, this is actually an ongoing periodic review of Board of Education expenditures, the Superintendent's Office and Cabinet Office disbursements. Just to show that accountability starts at the top, this will be an ongoing periodic review. And the last, this is more of a consulting engagement instead of an assurance engagement. And I would like to research and provide a recommendation on how to implement a fraud hotline at the district. A lot of fraud is detected through tips, and having a means to provide those tips is important. I'll be happy to answer questions about this plan.
Ms. Callan.
I just have a comment, and because I think there's been a little effort to downplay the watchdog piece of, or portion of your job, but I think that's important to have in place, and for people to know, for our patrons to know, for our employees to know that that is an important part of your position. And so while we want there to be this value added and cooperative approach to the work that you do, I think it's also important that our community knows that we're taking seriously our fiduciary responsibility to manage the funds that have been entrusted to us. And so I think, when I read about the fraud hotline, I thought that that would be an excellent way for people to have that kind of avenue.
Mr. Lee.
Question on the state audit follow-up. And you mentioned a little bit, and I guess I want to make sure I understand. As you're looking through the recommendations that we've implemented, you talked about compliance, that we're complying with them. Will you be looking at them from the standpoint of, while we may have done them, maybe they're not very effective and we should stop doing them? Will you be looking them from that perspective also, rather than just, hey, we said we complied, but that wasn't really a good decision to do it the way we did it? Or, will you be looking
Yes.
at it from that perspective, not just, hey, we said we'd do it, we did it, even though it's maybe the wrong thing to do? Looking back, certainly hindsight's 20/20. Will you be looking at it from that standpoint also?
Yes, it'll actually be 2 parts. One will be, okay, have district employees complied with the new policy changes? But then I'll also be looking to see, okay, has the district gone far enough, Or has the district gone too far? Have the changes caused more problems than they've solved? Have they made a process inefficient? Is it, like I've heard the term, bang for your buck, is it costing more than what it's worth? So yes, it's all of that.
Great. Thank you, and we'll be voting on these at the next meeting, and then yearly you'll be bringing us a work plan to approve.
Yes, yeah. Actually, annually the charter will be also presented again, and the work plan is an annual.
Great. Well,
thank you.
We look forward to it. Thanks. Good. Let's go on to action items for separate consideration, and remember on these there'll be no vote tonight. We will have them on the agenda for a vote in 2 weeks. The request to complete the initial documents for a lease on the ECSC Center. Dr. Harrell.
Good evening again. As the board remembers, we've been discussing the possibility of an expansion into a separate early childhood special education center on the southern part of town since initially in June was first brought to the board's attention. This is due to growth in the population of early childhood special education students. This particular center, we currently have 18 classrooms in the district that house early childhood special education students. And 13 of those are in the current center on Chestnut Expressway, with 5 of those being incorporated into our current buildings. With the growth, we're going to exceed our capacity on our projected growth at this point. We are currently 7 students under where we were December 1st of this time last year. These classrooms do not only serve students with special needs, but also serve their integrated peers. We can serve as many as 50% of those integrated peers in those classrooms. We currently have 25% of those, 25% integrated peers in those classrooms throughout the district. What you have before you tonight is a request to allow us to work with DESE and DESE to work with the contractor to develop the initial documents for a potential lease of a building on the south side of Springfield in order to expand by 3 classrooms, the number of classrooms we'd have available for early childhood special education. We would bring this request back to the board at the October regular meeting for approval, and then once those documents have been completed and reviewed by administration, we would come back to the board for approval to allow DESE to go into that lease with the contractor if the board so approves.
Questions for Dr. Harrell, Ms. Cowan?
Well, this is a issue that's near and dear to my heart because I've had 2 children go through this program. One is a child with special needs, and one, as at that point we called reverse mainstream, but a typically developed peer. And she is now in college preparing to be an early childhood special education teacher. So I think it's really important for our public to know, our speakers to know, that this program has been integrated with typically developed peers and children with special needs from the very beginning. And I don't think it's the district's intent to ever deviate from that. In fact, it's my understanding if we can expand the number of classrooms, we can actually expand the number of typically developed peers in those classrooms. So I think, I just think that's a very important point to make to our community, particularly to our speakers who, I think that was a very valid concern, but I think it's a concern that's addressed and is really part of our philosophy, throughout the district. And certainly as a parent of a child with special needs, is something that I've paid attention to. I think the other thing that's really important to know is that we don't really have the luxury right now in terms of the space we have district-wide to have 1 or 2 classrooms at our elementary schools dedicated to early childhood special education. I mean, is that my understanding? I think we're going to get reports later this month that talk about a 600 student increase in our K through 12 population.
Correct.
It's also my understanding that because of unique partnerships, and I think Mr. Renner might address this a little bit later, but the way funding comes to us, we have access to federal or state money, however it is, to do these kinds of facilities, working with DESE, another point that a speaker made, to build these kinds of classrooms, but we don't have that same access to that money to build elementary school classrooms. So we have to figure out, with the population we want to serve and need to serve, how to best do that with the funds that are available to us. And anybody who has gone over to the Early Childhood Center on, I think you said Chestnut, but it's College, yeah.
It's actually south, yes, South Chestnut.
That state-of-the-art facility that really dedicates classroom space specifically for early childhood children and their educators is something that I'm very proud of as a board member. I think I'm supportive of this. I hear the speaker's concerns, but I believe that we've addressed them and continue to keep that in the forefront as we look for ways to serve more children and to do that in an excellent way. So I'll just say that.
Other comments, questions? Dr. Frederick.
Dr. Harrell, you mentioned that currently we have 25% of our students at early childhood special ed that are regular ed students. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, 24, 25, right through there, yes.
Okay, so is there a reason why it's only at 25%? Because we can have up to 50%.
Due to the growth in the population needing services.
So at this point in time, there may be more that would like to bring their children to the center, but they cannot because of the space issue.
We believe absolutely there are, yes.
How do we advertise that opportunity to parents that you can bring your children to, regular ed children, to this?
I'm going to have to ask Ms. Wilson to answer that question. I don't honestly know on the typically developing children.
Good evening. I'm Sherry Wilson, and I am housed at the Early Childhood Special Education Center on College. And currently, we have students that are reverse mainstream, our integrated population. And in the past, there's many ways we get those. We have a lot of families, just as you mentioned, that we have served their children in that capacity before, so they come back to us and they want their children as a part of our program again because they feel like it's important and it serves them well too. We have a very high quality preschool program for early childhood kiddos, and it doesn't matter what their abilities are. It's a quality program. And so we've gotten those students back. Word of mouth is huge for us. The Parents as Teachers program and Wonder Years program, those students that are good fits for us because we are looking for those children that are kind of role model students. And we have plans to market further our program, but we think it would be very sad to market this program and get parents excited about being able to access this and not be able to accept the students. Because we got into a situation last year where if we had children that had to leave just because family situations changed, like the parents went to work and they needed full-time programming, we couldn't replace those with other reverse mainstream kids because we had so many coming in with IEPs, and those are our first priority. So in looking at communities across the state that are like us, there's never a shortage of those children that want to come in and those families and be a part of our program as those typical peers. We just don't want to put a big push out there at this point saying, come on, we want you in our program, and not have the space for them. So we've been very cautious with that, just using the resources that we've had for the past several years to get parents on board with us.
Thank you. I have one more question, Dr. Harrell. So you just indicated that the new site would provide 3 additional classrooms?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have a long-term growth projection study that tells us that these 3 classrooms will be sufficient for the next 2 or 3 years, or will we be needing to add more? Or because it looks like we've had a growth of 57 students from last school year to this school year. So if we continue to have that, what will this facility take care of that?
The facility that we are proposing with the 3 classrooms right now will be able to manage around 66 children there. We are expecting continued growth with students with special needs and early childhood, and we do have a projected potential plan to increase the size of that center to between 8 to 10 classrooms. At that time they would serve somewhere in the vicinity of 200 students, 100 in the morning shift and 100 in the afternoon shift.
Mr. Osmer.
I guess I'm a little confused. Some of the speakers, and we heard this before with the other facility, and I heard from parents that would call me about the same issue and about whether this is going to be less integration or more integration going forward, and what is the answer to that? Is there an answer to that?
The integration is obviously with the typically developing and same age peer.
I understand, but this would supplant some classrooms that we've already got in the district. Is that?
No. Our current
actually
18
not
classrooms we
moving
would continue to keep.
Okay, so we're keeping all the classrooms we've got.
Yes, this is about growth.
So this is about growth, okay. And those classrooms that we do have are staffed with typically developed children at a ratio, you said, of 24%?
Across the district is roughly 20. And correct me on that. 24, is that correct? Across district, roughly 24%.
So these kids would be staffed at a ratio of 50%.
We can have as many as 50%.
And we believe that this would allow that to happen at this site because of the space?
No. At this point, we have the number of students with needs that require us. We need space based on the students that need to be served. We would hope then that would also increase the number of typically developing peers as well. But I couldn't tell you we're for sure going to be at 50%. The state will allow us up to 50%.
Okay, so the fact that they're not in a quote-unquote school doesn't change the fact, the makeup of the classroom.
Correct.
Am I accurate there? That it may not be in a existing school, but the classroom that will be at this facility will, in all shapes and respects, look just like the classroom that they would be at in a school. Is that?
That is correct. And they learn key skills, not only about the classroom behavior itself, but just how to be in school, staying in line.
And then once these kids get into kindergarten, they would be in kindergarten just like they're in kindergarten today and like they've been in the past. Is that?
That is correct.
Is that accurate? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Brenner?
Well, a couple of things. I just noticed there's a lot of required. We're required by the state and federal government to serve children identified by age 3, and we're required to identify those students from 3 to 5. And that's early childhood. We don't have early childhood programs at most of our schools. So typically developing peers at age 3 to 5, we have to go out and seek and bring in because in most of our schools, they're not there. I understand being in a neighborhood and older brothers and sisters being in the school, but you can't, that doesn't mean that we would have a early childhood special education program in every school. And that would be the only way we could do that, is say we're going to dedicate at least 1 room, maybe 2 in every building that we have, so that if we have students that are identified, they can go to that neighborhood school, which at this point in time, we don't have the room to do it. We've got to push somebody else out if we're going to do that. And we are required to serve these students. So I think by working to increase the number of rooms that are available so that our typically developing number moves toward 50, if we're making progress, that's what we talk about on everything else. Are we making progress there? And the only way we're going to make progress is by having more rooms to do that. And if this center is done, and if in a bond issue we decide we need to add rooms at other schools, and that would be our first priority, then all of that can be seen. But this number, not only in Springfield but statewide, continues to grow. So this isn't adding 3 rooms, even adding 8 to 10 rooms, in my opinion, is not going to solve that issue, but it's moving us toward where, to me, we'd want to be, having the space for students possibly within more schools. But to me, the most important thing is the typically developing peers in the classroom with them, not whether it's in a building or whether it's in another building. To me, that's the most important thing, because when they reach kindergarten, they're going to be with typically developed peers, and what we're trying to do is get them ready for that so they're not behind at that point. So to me, this is a way that the state and federal government will pay for this. If we build rooms at buildings, our local taxpayers, that's part of our tax money too. I know we're a donor district to the state, but it's a way we get that money back. If we build rooms at a building, that's based on our local tax base only, where this is done completely from the state and doesn't take some of those funds to deliver exactly, to me, the same services. So this makes sense with a plan in place to know that it's not where we want to be, but it's making progress, and I think that's what we've said all along. That's what we want to do. We want to be making progress in every area.
A quick question. We've been in 3 years or 2 years. Do we have any, or have we done any, or have any data from parents or administrators or kindergartners where they've gone with respect? I mean, have we done any surveys? I was looking for Mark
Yes.
or whomever.
We have done.
With respect to thoughts from parents or students or principals. Do we have data on that since it's been a couple of years?
We do not have that with us this evening. We have done formal surveys with parents and have received near to better 90% satisfaction rate from parents. And we've also got a great deal of data back in a sense of comments and appreciation from the building principals and the preparedness for these students as they enter kindergarten.
Is that all parents, not just special needs parents, but the mainstream parents? Okay, that's everybody?
Great. Thank you very much. Action item 6.02, the health plan brokerage and consulting. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, and good evening. Action item 6.02 is the renewal of an existing contract that the district has with Gallagher Benefit Services, who serves as the district's broker and consultant for health plan related issues and health plan related contracts. The contract that we're proposing tonight was reviewed and drafted after the state audit, and we've incorporated the recommendations from the state auditor in the revised draft that we have. The fees have not changed, and the overall scope and service that Gallagher provides has also not changed. But it does provide for compensation both directly from the district for consulting services and standard rates and commission for contracts that are brokered through the consultant. and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Great. Forge ahead. You're up next.
6.03 is employee life insurance. This is part of the standard renewal that the district administers for the life insurance policy. This policy was brokered by Gallagher Benefit Services and marketed nationally. There were 14 respondents, and after analyzing the responses, the district recommends renewing the contract with the current provider, which is Unum Life Insurance Services. From the perspective of the plan participant, there is an increase in the coverage available through the voluntary supplemental life policy, and that's an expansion of existing benefit. The financial or the fiscal note that you see there is a reduction in premium paid by the district from a projection of $151,000 to $121,000 annually, and also a reduction on the part of the employee for the supplemental life from approximately $122,000 to $116,000, and that's just the result of the market, the district's experience, and the competitive marketing. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you.
So it's an increase of benefits for our employees and less money for us.
And for our employees.
And for our employees.
Correct.
That's because our employees are living longer. Yeah.
Good. Win-win. Go ahead.
Anyway.
6.04 is employee long-term disability insurance. Again, just as with the life insurance, this is part of our standard renewal cycle. We also marketed this coverage nationally through Gallagher Benefit Services and received 14 responses. At this point, our recommendation is to switch providers from the existing provider to Liberty Mutual Insurance providers. And the benefit change from the perspective of the plan participant is a reduction in the percentage of annual salary which is provided through the benefit from 66 2/3 to 60%. That's a minimal reduction, but it is much more consistent with what national trends are at this point. But we also are increasing the maximum monthly benefit from $3,000 to $5,000, and that would allow our primarily administrators and individuals making salaries over $50,000 to receive a maximum monthly benefit that is more representative of their annual salary. The fiscal note that you see there is a decrease to the district for the basic component of approximately $83,000, and then the supplemental component for employees who are in those brackets that are receiving a higher benefit amount over $50,000 salary level. There would be a slight increase for those individuals, but in exchange for that, they're receiving a higher benefit level. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
6.05 are our tax anticipation notes. It's that time of year, isn't it?
It is. About 50% of the district's operating revenue is local property taxes. Since our expenditures are more evenly spread throughout the year, this creates the potential for needing some additional funding. And I have a graphic here. This shows the year-to-date revenue and year-to-date expenditure for last year. And you'll see where the blue line drops below the red line. That's the area where our year-to-date expenditures exceed the revenue, and fortunately we have the fund balance, which historically has made up that difference, but you never know, and how much we'll need is unknown at this time. One example that's creating the uncertainty is that property taxes in December of 2009 we received $7.6 million. In the next 2 years, we receive $14 million. So it can swing quite a bit depending on the mood of the populace, whether they pay earlier in the month or later in the month. Administration is requesting authorization to solicit proposals from lenders to finance any operating funds cash flow deficit in an amount not to exceed $10 million. We estimate high, so we can be sure we have enough authority. Should there be a need for funding, we will come back to the board with a resolution at the November board meeting. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Lee.
I know this is just setting up the structure in case we need to. What's the frequency that we've done, that we've actually?
We have This is the third year, I believe, we've come back to the board for the $10 million. The only time we've had to use any of it was 2 years ago. We did not use any of it last year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. What am I supposed to click? Oh, the tree.
You can see your routine action items listed. They'll be voted on at the next meeting. We have one public speaker to address non-agenda items, and you'll have 3 minutes, Mr. Smith. 3 minutes for non-agenda items.
Just have a front sheet here, don't worry. Mr. President and board members and Dr. Ritter, I want to talk about ballot initiatives on the November ballot, just briefly. And I want to point out that in 2006, there were 28 initiative petitions filed with the Secretary of State. This year, there have been 140. I think we know where a lot of these came from. I think 14 were different carnations of these fair tax, so-called fair tax. And the individual who helped push that is also keeping his lawyers busy with new things. It makes the race for Secretary of State particularly interesting. I won't make any comments about individual candidates. It just makes it interesting. Proposition B, the tobacco tax. Missouri NEA supports the tobacco tax. I heard you talking about this last time, and you may talk about it again tonight, but the current Missouri rate is the lowest in the nation, lower than North Carolina, Kentucky, or any of the tobacco producing states. At 17 cents a pack, the surrounding states that connect to Missouri, the average is $1.07. So the American Cancer Society submitted this particular petition, and it would raise the tax by 90 cents per pack to bring it more in line with what the surrounding states have. Estimates from the Missouri Budget Project say that this would generate between $300 and $400 million, and approximately $150 million of that would go to K-12 and $100 million to higher ed. So Missouri NEA really supports that, and I know the board does too. You have a resolution. Right? Proposition E, Missouri NEA opposes. This is the part of the Affordable Care Act, calls for the creation of health insurance exchanges as a part of lowering health care costs so that more people can afford the cost of health insurance. Proposition E would prevent state and local governments from participating in the creation of these exchanges, which would require the federal government to step in and manage those programs and then charge the state. We oppose Proposition E so that Missouri can maintain state and local control in the creation and adapting of these exchanges to fit the needs of our citizens. The last one, Constitutional Amendment 3, repeal of the nonpartisan court plan in 1949. This plan was adopted by Missouri. It's been replicated in over 30 states across the nation. It's highly touted and well-respected plan. And now there are some ideological entities who would like to politicize our courts by having them elected or appointed by an elected official. Why not bring the partisanship of our state legislature to the Missouri court system? The time's up. It doesn't make sense to do that. We're adamantly opposed to this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I might remind everyone there are some support Proposition B stickers on your way out. So feel free to pick some of those up. Legislative update. Do we have anything, special session and veto session and all that's not affected? Anything we've...
You heard the language here.
Right.
I think Ray was...
Right.
Mr. Smith.
Future issues, we talked about the Hall of Fame already. Reminder to get, if there's any specifics, and I'll be polling each of you individually too, for our board retreat later this month. Ms. Cowan.
This last weekend was the Missouri School Boards Association annual conference at Tantera. And I don't have a formal report of the sessions that I attended, but one of the sessions that I attended made me realize that I think as a board member I need to have more information on the new teacher evaluation process and structure in Missouri, and how that also feeds into the superintendent evaluation, because that's our primary responsibility as a board. And I realized as I was sitting in that session that there was a lot that I didn't know about how we evaluate teachers and how that's evolving. I figure we're ahead of the game in a lot of regards, but I don't know if other board members would be interested in having that presented to us in the future, but
sure,
it would be very helpful to me, because it's and then how that feeds into our responsibility, and if there'd be any changes in how we do the superintendent evaluation. But I think the other thing I would just like to say from a board perspective is just how proud I was, again, to be from Springfield Public Schools. There were 3 presentations that were given on Friday. We had a busy morning. Mrs. Moore and Dr. Ritter, Mr. Lee started out with a huge room, over 200 people listening to our presentation on continuous quality improvement in the Baldrige model, and then the 21st century learning model with Dr. Hagerman and Dr. Pomperane and Mr. Hosmer was very well attended, and then in the afternoon or late morning, Mrs. Watts, Ms. Webb, Ms. Grable, and Mr. Renner did breakfast in the classroom presentation, and that spurred a lot of interest. I heard a lot of people talk about that, so just made me realize that we are ahead of our peers in a lot of what we're doing, and a lot of districts are looking to us for leadership and guidance, so I think it was a good conference. I think Mrs. Frederick's going to say something about other aspects of the weekend. So,
I'll just speak to, and I attended some great sessions also on Saturday. I was only able to go up on Saturday and Sunday, but the concluding banquet on Saturday night was a very it was a great banquet, great guest speaker. And I think what was most impressive to me was it was facilitated as our current SBA president, Mr. Lee, and he facilitated that banquet, and it was so obvious to me in his remarks and his discussion during the banquet that his dedication to students in Missouri and to Springfield is exemplary, and I was very proud to be a member of this board and know that one of our very own was up there doing a terrific job.
Dr. Ritter.
I have never, ever in my life heard a presentation or a concert like Central's Choir. That was unbelievable. Standing ovation twice, and of course to have Alberta shaking afterwards is a good sign that we did hit a home. She hit a home run, but it was second to none. I have to say this, and not just because it's our choir, but I heard it from my peers. I heard it from other board members. They hit a ball out of the park on that one. So I think we need to pat them on the back big time.
I heard that all weekend.
It's unbelievable.
Well, and I just, again, want to express appreciation and congratulations to Mr. Lee for serving as MSBA president and following in Mr. Renner's footsteps, who's also a previous MSBA president. And you don't see that all around the state. And to have 2 of our current board members who have served in this role, they do us well up there. So thank you, Mr. Lee, for
before we step away,
taking this on.
And I think, isn't it true that the attendance was up for, this is, I don't know how many years I've heard, but it's the highest attendance we've had in a number of years at that meeting.
More than 5. I'm not sure if
yes,
it got to the 10, but it was definitely the highest we'd had in
a
years.
number of years. And I still, every time I go, there's excellent sessions, and ours are always well attended. But I think the conversations I'm able to just have there informally with other board members that have been on boards for years that I know, or administrators from other districts, and then they're asking questions. I think just the informal conversation there because you're there with people that you just don't have that opportunity to be with, to me is just invaluable. And so there were some excellent sessions. Again, our board and administration presented some excellent ones, but I really value the time that you can make those contacts and talk about some things that are just happening every day in districts, and how they're addressing those, and also them asking, what are you doing, and having that opportunity that oftentimes you don't have unless you're just right there.
I'd make one comment. In these sessions, we hear a lot, and I hear a lot about the quality of the board and all that for our board. But I hear probably twice as much about the quality of the staff that we have. And the staff that participates in the state activities, that makes presentation, that works with other districts. It's probably 2-to-1 response that I hear about how effective, high quality people that we have in our district to help other districts, whether it's just calling to find out information, having them come here to look at stuff, whatever. I hear it all the time, even more than we talk about the quality of our board, which is great, but I'm just saying a lot of it's flowing down, or it's coming up, whichever way you want to go. But I couldn't pass that up, that I hear time and time again about the quality of our staff across the state.
Well, I was unable to attend because I, along with Dr. Hackenworth and Mr. McKenna, were attending the community leadership visit, 46 members from the Springfield community doing a fact-finding trip to Fort Collins, Colorado. This is the 19th year that the Chamber of Commerce has organized these trips. I've been to cities such as Boise and Grand Rapids, Chattanooga, and this time in Fort Collins, Colorado. While we didn't discuss education issues as a specific topic, I think we all got some good take-home information from it. Innovation that's being done in Fort Collins, how to handle HR based on how HR is handled at a large brewery out there. Sounds crazy, but some great ideas. And learning from peers out there, the executive of the large local healthcare system, they won the Baldrige Award last year. So it was good to hear from him, and also good for us to work with our Springfield peers to work together better. And it was obvious that the collaboration that we see here between the school district and the city council and the universities wasn't quite on the same level out there. So even though they're a highly performing health system and a highly performing school district, not a lot of meshing on some of their goals. I think we should be proud of how we've done that here. So remember to do your plus deltas. We have
one other announcement.
Yes.
Just MSBA related. MSBA regional meeting is, I believe, October 15th. No, right? November 1st? They moved? Oh, I thought it was 15th. Never mind. We have a meeting before that. I'm just going to remind everybody that I think it's in Ash Grove, I believe.
Yeah, it's on the first.
And the topic is tax credits. So you need to be there.
These are our handouts on continuous improvement, and so these are ours as opposed to other people. But anyway, because we're going to be using these from now on, so you have them at your fingertips.
We have no need for an executive session, and I'd take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor, aye. Good.
Aye.
We don't have to have a motion for that, do we? I'm used to. Good. Thank you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.